Imagine this. You wake up and before your feet even touch the ground, your mind already starts rehearsing. Who do I have to be today? What do I have to say? You scroll through your phone, scanning other people's curated lives, subconsciously absorbing the silent message. This is who the world likes. This is what the world rewards. So you put on your invisible armor, a smile that doesn't belong to you, a tone that hides the tremor in your voice. You nod, you agree, you perform. And the world claps, silently, through approval, through attention, through that warm little feeling that says, I belong. But beneath it, something aches. You feel it when the laughter fades, when you're alone with your thoughts and the performance stops. There's a strange emptiness in being liked for something that isn't you. Yet you keep going because the fear of disapproval, of being misunderstood, rejected, or ignored, feels heavier than the weight of pretending. It starts early, this need to be approved. As children, we learned it from the way our parents smiled when we behaved and frowned when we didn't. We learned that love was conditional, that it could be withdrawn if we were too loud, too emotional, too strange. So we trimmed ourselves down to fit the mold. We became quiet where we wanted to roar, agreeable where we wanted to say no. Every good job became a little dose of validation, a hit of belonging that kept us safe. And then we grew up. But the child inside us never stopped craving applause. We just changed stages. The classroom became the office. The playground became social media. The teacher's nod became the algorithm's approval. We post, we pose, we perform endlessly. Our smiles have become screensavers. Our opinions, rehearsed. We've mastered the art of looking confident while silently starving for acceptance. Deep down, there's a part of you that knows something is off. You can feel it when you look in the mirror and don't quite recognize the eyes staring back. You can feel it when you agree with something that doesn't align with your gut. The truth is, the more you chase approval, the further you drift from yourself. You start mistaking applause for affection, attention for love, validation for connection. The irony is painful. In trying to be liked by everyone, you become no one. You adapt so much that you forget your original shape. You start to wonder, who am I when nobody's watching? But that question terrifies you, because you've built your identity on being seen. You fear that if you stop performing, the world will turn away, and maybe it will. But maybe that's not the tragedy you think it is. Because approval isn't love. It's control. And control is a fragile thing to build your self-worth on. When you base your value on someone else's opinion, you live in a constant state of negotiation. Adjusting, managing, shrinking. You start filtering your words, censoring your truth, reading rooms like they're judges' panels. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every silence, a threat. You spend your life auditioning for acceptance, not realizing the role you're playing is slowly killing your soul. And the cruel part is, the world rewards it. Society praises the agreeable, the polite, the adaptable. It tells you to network, to smile, to brand yourself. It teaches you that success is a matter of perception, that confidence is crafted, and that honesty, real, raw honesty, is too much. So you learn to tone yourself down. You become palatable, polished, presentable. You build a mask so convincing that even you start believing it's your face. But then, something cracks. Maybe it's burnout. Maybe heartbreak. Maybe just the quiet fatigue of pretending. There comes a moment when the applause doesn't land anymore, when the compliments feel hollow, when the validation stops working. That's when you start to feel it, the ache of the real self pressing against the mask, begging to breathe. You start realizing that approval doesn't actually heal the emptiness. It only distracts you from it. It's like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. The more you consume, the more dehydrated you become. And maybe that's where freedom begins, in that exhaustion. In that quiet moment when you realize, no amount of approval can make up for the feeling of being disconnected from yourself. You start to see the truth beneath the illusion, that approval is not love, it's performance. It's a transaction. You give people the version of you they like, and in return, they give you comfort. But comfort isn't peace. Real peace doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being known, even if being known means being misunderstood, disliked, or left alone. So as you sit there, Peeling back the layers of your practice smile, there's a whisper in the silence. You don't have to earn your place here. You were never meant to be a performance. Because when you stop chasing approval, something profound happens. The mask starts to fall. And what's left is an emptiness. It's you, raw, unfiltered, unpolished. The version of yourself that doesn't need to be loved by everyone, because it finally belongs to you. That's where the story really begins, not when the world approves of you, but when you finally stop asking it to. The mask. It's not made of plastic or porcelain. It's woven from habit, fear, and memory. You've worn it for so long that it's no longer a disguise. It's become your second skin. You smile through it, you speak through it, and most of the time, you forget it's even there. Until one day, something inside you begins to stir. A quiet discomfort, a sense that you're living slightly off-key. You laugh when you don't mean it, you say, yes, when you want to scream, no. And at night, when you're finally alone, you feel like a stranger in your own story. Carl Jung called this mask the persona. It's the face we present to the world. The socially acceptable self that allows us to function, to belong, to fit within the collective order. It's not evil. In fact, it's necessary. Without it, society would collapse into chaos. We all wear masks to play our roles: friend, parent, professional, lover. But the problem begins when the mask stops being a tool and starts being an identity. When we confuse who we appear to be with who we truly are. The persona is a survival mechanism, a bridge between our inner world and the external one. But what happens when we start living entirely on that bridge, afraid to cross back to the other side? That's when the disconnection begins. When you identify too much with the persona, you repress the parts of you that don't fit the image. The anger, the jealousy, the vulnerability, they all get pushed into the shadows. Jung called this other side the shadow self, the hidden, disowned aspects of who we are. And the more we deny them, the more they start to control us unconsciously. You can see it in the people who always have to be liked, who fear saying no, who crumble at criticism. They've built their lives around maintaining the mask, but it's exhausting. Because the mask doesn't breathe. It doesn't rest. It demands perfection. And perfection, as Nietzsche once wrote, is a prison disguised as virtue. Nietzsche believed that authenticity is not comfort, it's confrontation. To become who you are, he said, is to face the chaos inside you and sculpt meaning out of it. But the modern mind resists this. It would rather curate an image than confront its truth. So we craft identities that look strong but feel hollow, constantly edited, filtered, and presented. Social media has turned this ancient psychological process into an endless performance. The persona has become digitized, a pixelated mirror that reflects what others want to see. Every post, every caption, every photo becomes another layer of the mask. You start curating not just what you share, but who you are. You measure your worth in views, likes, followers, external metrics that never touch the soul. And the cruel irony? The more you seek approval online, the more disconnected you become offline. The validation hits like sugar, sweet at first, but empty. You start needing more just to feel the same. It's an addiction of the ego. This is where the psychological dissonance begins, a quiet war between your inner truth and your outer performance. On one side is your need for belonging, safety, recognition. On the other is your soul, whispering for authenticity, for freedom, for depth. But the persona doesn't like depth. It prefers surfaces, impressions, masks that sparkle under the light. Every time you agree to something that betrays your truth, the mask tightens. Every time you silence your emotions to keep the peace, the mask thickens. Until one day, you realize you've built a cage out of other people's expectations, and you're the one locking the door. The strange thing is, the mask isn't just social, it's psychological. It's the part of your mind that learned early on what was safe to express and what wasn't. Maybe as a child, you learned that being quiet made you lovable, or that being funny kept people close. Maybe you became the caretaker, the achiever, the easygoing one, anything to earn love that felt uncertain. So the mask formed not out of deceit, but out of fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being too much. And now, as an adult, those fears still linger, just hidden behind confidence or charm. You smile your way through discomfort, because the mask has become your default defense. But the truth is, you can't be fully alive while hiding behind it. The price of approval is authenticity. Philosophically, this is the paradox of the human condition. We crave belonging, yet belonging often demands conformity. Society asks us to play roles, but selfhood asks us to break them. To be authentic is to risk disapproval. To be real is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable is terrifying, because it means we might not be loved. But here's the truth no one tells you. Love that depends on your mask isn't love. It's an agreement between illusions. The people who only love your persona are in love with the idea of you, not the reality of you. And as long as you keep performing for them, you'll never know who could love you for real. This is where Jung's shadow work becomes more than theory, it becomes survival. Facing your shadow means reclaiming the parts of you that you've exiled in exchange for acceptance. It means sitting with your anger instead of hiding it, owning your jealousy instead of denying it, embracing your sensitivity instead of apologizing for it. Every piece you reclaim weakens the mask. Every truth you honor brings you closer to the center of yourself. But don't romanticize it, this process hurts. It's not poetic at first, it's disorienting. You'll feel lost, confused, even empty. Because when you strip away the false identities, what's left is silence. And silence can be terrifying. The persona gave you structure, validation, applause. Without it, you feel naked. But that's the point. Only when you're stripped of your borrowed selves can you begin to sense who you really are. Nietzsche called this self-overcoming, the act of transcending the illusions that once defined you. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the parts you've rejected. Alan Watts called it letting go, the realization that the person you think you need to be is just an idea. They were all pointing to the same truth. The mask keeps you safe, but it also keeps you asleep. And maybe that's why so many people never wake up, because waking up requires breaking something that once protected you. It means disappointing others. It means being misunderstood. It means standing in front of the mirror and not recognizing the person you've become. But it's only in that disorientation that freedom starts to breathe. There's a moment, subtle, fleeting, when you catch yourself mid-performance. You're about to say something just to fit in, to please, to impress. But this time you pause. You notice it. You realize you have a choice. You can keep playing the part, or you can step off the stage. That single moment of awareness, that's the crack in the mask. And from that crack, light begins to enter. You start noticing how much of your life has been shaped by invisible expectations, how often you bend to avoid being judged, how deeply you crave being seen, yet fear showing who you are. You begin to understand that approval is just a mirror reflecting your mask, never your soul. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, you start to withdraw your energy from the performance. You stop rehearsing lines that aren't yours. You stop laughing to fill silence. You start sitting with yourself, quietly, honestly. At first, the silence feels heavy. But over time, it starts to feel like home. Because in that silence, you're not performing. You're being. And maybe that's the moment when the real transformation begins. Not with grand revelations, but with small, subtle refusals to wear the mask one more day. That's when the shift happens. The outer world loses its grip. The need to impress softens. You begin to see the futility in constantly chasing validation, because the person you were trying to prove yourself to was never really watching. They were too busy performing their own act. And in that realization, something inside you exhales, a quiet, almost sacred peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to be liked, followed, or approved of. You begin to understand, the mask wasn't your prison. It was your teacher. It showed you exactly who you no longer need to be. There comes a moment, and it rarely announces itself, when you simply can't pretend anymore. You're sitting in a meeting, smiling at the right times, nodding on cue, doing everything that used to keep you safe. But inside, you feel hollow. The words leave your mouth, yet none of them feel like yours. You walk home that evening and realize you're tired in a way that sleep can't fix. Something inside you whispers, "I can't do this anymore." That's where the unmasking begins, not in some grand rebellion, but in quiet fatigue. The soul has limits, and when it's been silenced too long, it begins to revolt. It starts as a faint discomfort, an ache that says, "This isn't me." But soon, it becomes impossible to ignore. The smiles feel forced. The conversations feel shallow. The world that once validated you starts to feel suffocating. You try to push it away, but it grows louder. It feels like losing your identity, but in truth, you're losing your illusion. Because what's really happening is this: your false self is dying. Carl Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The unmasking is that descent, the moment you finally turn toward the darkness you've been avoiding. You start seeing how much of your life was built to earn acceptance. You begin questioning why you chase approval in the first place. You realize that your worth was never truly in your own hands, it was outsourced to everyone else's opinions. At first, this realization is devastating. You feel naked, like standing in the middle of a crowded room without your armor. All those years of being the good one, the pleasant one, the reliable one, they crumble. You don't know who you are without them. You look in the mirror and see two versions of yourself, the one the world loves and the one you've ignored. That second one, quiet, uncertain, a little wild, has been waiting. And now that the mask has cracked, she finally breathes. The process of unmasking isn't clean or cinematic. It's messy, emotional, and often painful. You'll grieve the old self, even if it wasn't real. Because the mask gave you comfort, identity, and belonging. It gave you a script. Without it, life feels unscripted, and that's terrifying. But what if that fear is actually the doorway? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps, wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one thing: the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. And here, that choice is this: will you continue to live according to the approval of others, or will you face the anxiety of being yourself? Freedom doesn't begin with rebellion. It begins with surrender, the surrender of your performance, your image, your need to be seen as good. You start realizing how deeply approval has infiltrated everything. You wore clothes to please others. You spoke carefully to sound intelligent. You pursued achievements not because they fulfilled you, but because they impressed people. And now, stripped of those layers, you face a kind of spiritual nakedness, terrifying but honest. This is the death of the mask. And like all deaths, it comes with pain. But beneath that pain, something sacred stirs. It's not confidence, not arrogance, it's aliveness. You begin to feel what it's like to be unfiltered, unpolished, unscripted. You speak your truth and your voice shakes, but you speak anyway. You set a boundary and someone walks away, but you breathe easier. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. And slowly, you begin to see that rejection is not failure, it's purification. Every time someone walks away from your truth, they make space for someone who can actually see you. The mask was keeping the wrong people close. This is what Alan Watts meant when he said, "When you let go of trying to control the world, you find that it begins to flow naturally." When you stop controlling how others see you, you begin to see yourself clearly for the first time. You start noticing little moments of peace, moments that used to be drowned out by anxiety. A walk alone feels sacred. Silence feels safe. Being unseen feels like a relief. Because you're no longer living for the echo of approval, you're listening for the whisper of truth. Jung called this the night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious where you confront everything you've buried. The journey isn't glamorous. It's not enlightenment under sunlight, it's clarity in darkness. You'll face guilt, shame, and grief, not because you're broken, but because you're finally honest. And in that honesty, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing wholeness because you realize you already are. The real self was never missing. It was only hidden beneath the noise of who you thought you had to be. You learn that peace doesn't mean perfection. It means integration. It means you no longer have to hide the parts that once made you feel unworthy. You accept your contradictions, your kindness and your rage, your confidence and your doubt, your strength and your fragility. You begin to see that the self isn't a fixed identity, but a living river, fluid, dynamic, whole. And here's the strange miracle. Once you stop needing approval, you start radiating something that feels like power, not dominance, but presence. People sense it. They might not understand it, but they feel it. It's the calmness of someone who no longer needs to be validated. The quiet magnetism of authenticity. You become dangerous, not because you're loud, but because you're free. Free from the desperate need to please. Free from the exhausting chase for applause. Free from the illusion that you must prove yourself to exist. And this freedom changes how you love, how you work, how you move through the world. You stop choosing people who only mirror your mask. You stop settling for shallow conversations. You begin valuing silence, truth, and connection that doesn't need performance. There's a different kind of beauty in this stage, raw, unedited, human. You cry more honestly. You laugh without checking who's watching. You say no without guilt, yes without calculation. You stop chasing perfect moments and start inhabiting real ones. The world may not applaud this version of you. It might even reject it. But your soul, your quiet, patient soul, begins to applaud from within. And that applause sounds nothing like noise. It sounds like peace. You start to understand that the unmasking wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you were before you learned to perform. Before you built the persona. Before you mistook approval for love. That's the paradox. When you stop chasing approval, you lose the illusion of connection, but gain something far deeper. Authenticity. And authenticity always carries its own gravity. It attracts the right people, opportunities, and peace, not through performance, but through presence. You stop asking, do they like me? And start wondering, do I like who I am when I'm with them? You stop asking, am I enough for them? And start realizing, were they ever enough for my truth? The unmasking isn't about rebellion. It's about reunion, returning to yourself after years of exile. You look back at your old life, the performance, the striving, the exhaustion, and you can finally see it clearly. It wasn't fake. It was survival. But survival isn't living. Now you're ready to live. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of all this. You didn't lose yourself in the chase for approval, you just buried yourself under it. And now, as the mask falls and the dust clears, you're not meeting a stranger. You're meeting the self that's been waiting for you all along. Life after the mask is quieter, but not empty. At first, it feels strange to walk through the world without the usual armor. You speak, and your words sound different. You make decisions, and for once, they aren't shaped by what others might think. The silence that once felt unbearable now feels like oxygen. There's peace in it, not the loud, triumphant kind, but the steady heartbeat of authenticity. You begin to realize that freedom isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It looks like saying no without explaining. It feels like laughing even when no one else does. It's the gentle comfort of knowing that you no longer need to perform to be worthy. Approval once ruled your choices like an invisible god. Now it's just background noise. The world doesn't change when you take off the mask, but how you move through it does. You start noticing how much of life is built on performance. Conversations filled with pretense, people posting their smiles like currency. You don't judge it anymore, you understand it. You were there once too. But now you walk slower, listen deeper, and choose more carefully what deserves your energy. Sometimes people will drift away. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant. And they're right, you have changed. You've stopped being who they needed you to be. The version of you that bent for approval no longer exists. Can hurt, but it's also pure relief. Because in that space, new connections begin to form, ones built not on performance, but resonance. The people who meet your truth will never require your mask. There's power in that kind of simplicity. You start valuing honesty over image, depth over attention, silence over noise. You realize that real love, from others and from yourself, can only exist where pretending ends. The love that remains is quiet, grounded, real. And in time, you stop fearing disapproval altogether. It loses its sting. You understand now that rejection isn't a punishment, it's redirection. Every no simply guides you closer to the people and places where your truth fits naturally. One morning, you look at yourself in the mirror and, for the first time in a long while, There's no performance behind your eyes. Just presence. You're not trying to appear calm, confident, or composed, you just are. That's when you realize the search is over. When you stop chasing approval, you don't lose love, you uncover it. The kind that doesn't depend on applause or perfection. The kind that feels like coming home to yourself. And that's when you finally understand, the mask didn't fall off to expose your flaws. It fell off to reveal your freedom.